that face. Isn't that not Senator Burke, but just Mr. Burke? Good morning, Nazim. How are you, sir?
Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
I am pretty good.
I don't think most of your listeners will have recognized my face. My face is not normally bearded, but that's part of COVID-19.
Your face has gone into isolation and you're growing a beard, right?
That's correct, part of the isolation. Good morning to you. Good morning to all of your listeners, wherever they are, listening in on different media. In the United States, United Kingdom, and elsewhere, we want to say a pleasant good morning, and of course extend our deepest sympathies to those who have lost loved ones, especially in the US and the UK and other parts of the world. We must express empathy as well, George, with those of our citizens who have been afflicted by, this virus and their families. We wish continuous recovery, restoration to good health. We must also commend, George, the health workers, those who have done a tremendous job over the last month and a half or so. And in particular, we should say that the police have been very impressive in their handling of the crisis. The COVID coordinating team led by Minister Steele, the COVID-19 response coordinator, the epidemiologist, who I must say with pride is a young man from Carriacou, my neighbor. I'm extremely proud of what Dr. Charles has been doing. Overall, we must congratulate the government of Grenada for what they have done. And we must say a very, well recognized, I should say, congratulations to the new opposition leader that has now been appointed, Mr. Tobias Clement. So we are here, and we are happy to be given the opportunity to say a few words this morning, and I look forward to that conversation.
Well, it's been an awfully long time, Nazim, and I bet you didn't expect that when on your first visit back you would automatically be appointed senator. I said a little while ago, slip of the tongue there. But
bad habits die hard, you see.
Yes. Don't remind me, Nazim. I don't know if you know somebody in England named Marina Williams Johnson saying good morning to you and how good it is to see you. I think we all feel really good at seeing you this morning, and we're delighted that you could make it. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, it's been a little while since last we saw you. What have you been up to since? You mentioned to me this past week that you'd been quiet, but observing what's going on. Talk to me.
Well, first of all, I am primarily engaged in livelihood, making a living. Because as you would appreciate, George, I'm not a wealthy person. Having been involved in the politics for many years, it involves sacrifices and compromises. And now that I am not directly in the front line, in a manner of speaking, I have returned to the practice of law in a more dedicated way, trying to earn and trying to live and trying to support myself and my family. So that has been a major part of what I've been doing. In the meantime, I continue to assist in the constituency of St. George Northeast. This is my home, this is my community, these are the people that I love. And in many different ways, I continue to assist in whatever way I can with persons not playing political games, but more being focused on matters of assistance wherever we can, whether it's financial or whether it's advice, whatever the form it takes, assisting people in our community. I also have been assisting somewhat in the background, but assisting especially the young senators where I could in ensuring that they understand the parliamentary procedure and making suggestions where I can in respect of the bills that are coming up for debate. Because I do believe that at the end of the day, it is the young people that will have to take charge of our future. They are the future. And whatever support and advice I can give in that regard, I continue to provide.
So in other words, you've been busy and not sitting on your laurels. You just mentioned, you're still helping the young senators in the Senate and Parliament. What changes do you foresee with the appointment of the new opposition leader? What changes do you foresee coming down the road?
Well, I think change can occur at two different levels. The dynamics, first of all, at the level of the House of Representatives, the dynamic of that house will change somewhat, in that you now have somebody who would be in there in an official capacity as opposition leader, taking issue with the issues that must be taken issue with, so to speak. Somebody is going to disagree with the government on some of the policy choices that it makes, on some of the laws that it seeks to pass, and that person will speak up. So I think having an official member of the opposition in the parliament is going to be useful. It's going to be helpful. It will, in some respects, strengthen the democratic traditions of the country. We've not had an opposition leader since 2013, formally speaking. And of course, that, I believe, is an opportunity for the new opposition leader to show his colors, in a manner of speaking, and to be the voice of the populists who do not have a voice in the lower house of parliament. I think also at the level of the Senate, there could be some new dynamics depending on what choices unfold. Of course, with a new leader of the opposition, he would now have the prerogative, so to speak, of selecting those members of the Senate who he is authorized under the Constitution to select, 3 members of the Senate. And I anticipate that there may well be some change or modification in that framework. Now, we presently have 3 independent senators, so to speak. I'm not referring here to the agriculture and health and business representatives, but 3 representatives that are there at the discretion of the Governor General. And it is quite possible that those persons may be asked to relieve themselves of the position or may be relieved of the position. It is quite possible that the new leader of the opposition may ask the Governor General to elect new persons. It is possible that these members may choose to resign so as to give way and give the opportunity to the new leader of the opposition to make the choices that he would be more comfortable with. So I think we have to anticipate that a change in dynamic may come both at the level of the lower house and at the level of the upper house.
And change can be for better or for worse.
Yes, that is always the case. Change can be for the better, change can be for the worse. We hope that these changes are for the better. I do believe, and
I was just going to ask you, Naz, are you optimistic? Are you optimistic?
Yes, I am optimistic about the future because I do believe that as long as we do have opportunities, there is reason for optimism. And every crisis, every challenge, every difficulty, every adversity presents with it side by side opportunities. The secret, I think, for the leadership, for leaders, is to be able to spot those opportunities in the midst of a crisis. That's essentially what visioning is. The essence of vision is to be able to spot opportunities within a crisis and grasp those opportunities by the hand and take them and move forward and allow them to blossom into a new reality. So I'm eternally optimistic about Grenada's possibilities and Grenada's future. I do believe and I do maintain that this country has tremendous potential. What has driven my own commitment to the policy-making process in the country and to the politics of the country is the unshakable belief that if this country were to find the right caliber of leadership, and I'm not speaking here of any one political party, but if it can find the right calibration in its leadership dispensation, this country can be the envy of most of the countries in the Caribbean region. That's my firm conviction.
You know, as I listen to you, I can't help but detect your sense of optimism. And I'm sure that over the last month, you've spent some time reflecting on where do we go from here. A lot of people are obsessed with the mess that we find ourselves in, not just us, but the rest of the world. Um, and I am hoping to get people to start thinking about what's next, what comes after the coronavirus. Already we're seeing indications that agriculture is going to play a far more important role than it has to this point. What have you been able to pick up, Naz? What changes do you expect coming out of this crisis?
Well, let me say, George, the our country, and of course most of the Caribbean countries, to be frank, but our country has experienced low average annual economic growth for a very long time. And this low or negative, it has gone below the radar. The needle has gone below the radar. It has been above the radar, but whenever it goes above the radar, it's by very small amounts, right? Average annual economic growth has been extremely low over the years, and frankly speaking, this has largely been the result of erroneous development strategy that focused on offshore banking, call centers, economic citizenship, instead of promoting the productive sectors of the economy, such as and investing in the productive sectors of the economy, such as agriculture and agro-industries, education, health and wellness services, energy development, technology, the things that truly have the capacity to transform the economy and put us on a path of sustainable long-term growth and development, growth that is inclusive, growth that is equitable, that can ensure that everybody will get a piece of the pie, in a manner of speaking. Our policy choices, in other words, have been erroneous. And because of those bad choices, insufficient growth has turned into constrained public finances for the government. Governments do not collect sufficient monies. The truth of the matter is, it's a very small tax base. I heard the Prime Minister referring to it in his presentation a couple of days ago. That is a very small tax base, limited revenues coming from different sources. And the government, of course, is required to finance all kinds of things, and what it means really is that the health system is underfunded. We have weak governance, increases in public debt because we are trying to borrow money to do all the things that really need to be done in the country, and large deficits over the years. This virus can spread very quickly in poorer areas where there is no running water, poor sewage systems, communities with low education levels, bad prevailing social habits, and even in areas where you have skepticism about government and the efforts of government, right? So given our weak health systems, the shortage of doctors, health workers, medicine, medical supplies, the virus can have devastating impact on our societies and economies. Now you say post-COVID. The question is, what is post-COVID and when is post-COVID? We are already hearing, George, that there are the view is strongly held in some quarters that there could be a second surge or a second spike of this disease, a resurgence in the fall. We are also hearing, surely out of Korea, South Korea at the moment, that some of the persons who tested positive for the virus, as many as 190 something of them, I'm told, who tested positive, have since been cleared, and there has now been some kind of resurgence. Revival, whatever that word, this scientific word would be most appropriate.
But it's being detected in them again.
It's been detected in them again, yeah? So that, we don't know when this thing is going to end, what it's going to mean, So the government is going to be facing the potential of a very heavy human, financial, economic, and social cost. At the same time, this crisis, as I was saying earlier, does provide some opportunities for the government and for the country as a whole to re-examine how we run our economies, how we run our societies. In particular, what kind of fiscal and economic policy priorities that we choose. I think that's the question you're addressing. For example, what priority do we give to our health sector, to diagnostic capacity, testing capacity in the country, not just for COVID, but remember, George, we in the last 50 years, the world has seen the emergence of 29 new diseases, yes, ranging from Ebola to MERS to SARS to chikungunya to Zika to the coronavirus, novel coronavirus, and many others. And each of these epidemics and then pandemics can have a devastating toll on economies and society. So it is quite clear that we are living in dangerous times. And so for any economy or society, you must ask yourself, what am I going to do to strengthen my health system going forward? Are we stocking sufficient quantities of the requisite supplies and for dealing with pandemics? Do we have goggles? Do we have personal protective equipment? Do we have sufficient ICU units in our country? Do we have masks that are required? Given that this thing can reoccur, how are we going to deal with this situation? Do we have a proper health infrastructure? How do we train and keep and compensate our health workers? We are training doctors. Many of them are getting frustrated. Many of them are leaving the public service and going to see where they can get jobs elsewhere. Many of the nurses that we are training are looking for jobs and opportunities and job security elsewhere. Are we training sufficient of them? Are we compensating them? What strategy do we have for keeping them in place? So health is going to be a big issue going forward. What about agriculture? Are we giving sufficient priority to our agricultural sector, to our food and nutrition security? And what resources have been dedicated to it? For example, George, as you listen to a lot of the conversation and the discourse that's taking place, we are hearing everywhere that the impact that this disease may have on a person depends to a large extent on the quality of your immune system, on the state of your immune system. Your immune system is linked to your lifestyle, is linked to the food that you eat, the quality of nutrition that you take in, whether you're exercising, whether you're keeping fit, and other things like that. So if we are going to ensure part of fighting this disease and the future risk to disease is that we are going to have to ensure that there is food and nutrition security in the country. What are we going to invest in agriculture to ensure that we do that? How do we strengthen the Food and Nutrition Council? What commitments do we give to it? How do we ensure that we educate people? What it may also require not just agriculture and health, but a revamping of the education system and the education curriculum. For example, is it more important to teach sex education in schools than to teach hygiene? Are we really teaching our young people and our people how to practice good hygiene? Because again, we are hearing and we are seeing that it's not just a question of wearing a mask. It's about ensuring that you develop good habits. And if you develop good hygiene habits, they in turn can end up ensuring that your character changes, because it is the repetition of activity that results in habits, and it is the practice of good habits that ultimately become formed into and ingrained into your character. So the social character of the society must be changed, and that will require a certain degree of leadership. What resources are we giving to developing the public health capacity in the country and the public health status in the country? Are we going to ensure that every citizen has running water? It's one thing to say wash your hands all the time. What about the people who don't have water? What about the people who don't have pipes? How do they ensure that if they don't have water, they will wash their hands several times a day? Can they afford it? Do the circumstances allow it? This is going to be important. What about the commitment to ensuring that people are able to properly dispose of waste in a hygienic way? Are we going to ensure, for example, that our people have indoor toilets? You know, there are parishes in this country where still 20% of the people still are using outdoor toilets. You know, that's certainly the case in one or two parishes. What are we going to do? In other words, how do you prioritize for changing the economy, for changing the society, for changing the habits and the practices in the society? This is going to be a big challenge for the government. And these challenges are going to come at a time when we are seeing the risk of increased new pandemics. We are seeing the risk of not only the pandemics, a return of this one, but the exposure to new ones as well, George, and I think we must not forget that, the looming threat of natural disasters in our countries, hurricanes,
and climate change,
tsunamis, earthquakes, yes, and climate change, and the need to invest in disaster risk reduction and building resilience. You know, our countries are so small that when a hurricane hits, it's not like what happens in the United States or the United Kingdom. If something happens in California, they can take resources from New York and bring it to California. Something happens in Louisiana, they can take resources from New York and bring it to Louisiana. When something hits our country, the entire economy, the entire country, right, is destroyed in one stroke. And so you have to be able to invest up front in building resilience so that we can withstand the risks and dangers of these natural disasters. So it's not just a case of fighting the invisible enemy, but a case also of preparing for the visible enemy. And in that context, I'm saying the challenge for development is going to be huge, and these countries simply cannot afford to be making these little cheap choices based on political considerations to keep yourself and your base happy, or to keep your friends and your members happy. But there has to be a long-term strategy for development that will require a reallocation and shifting of resources that moves away from the kind of frivolous choices of economic policy to the things that have the potential for building resilience, fighting climate change, and providing long-term sustainable jobs for our people. George, you know, this crisis has created some monumental problems for our country. The government has said that it's going to respond by a stimulus package. Frankly speaking, as I hear the words stimulus package, I take it with a grain of salt, because that's the word that the big countries are using. They are actually introducing genuine stimulus package in the United States, $2 trillion. That is more than the GDP of all of Africa combined. And that's what they're going to be doing in their country. For us, this is more in the nature of a survival kit, not so much a stimulus package. This is not going to have and I'm not blaming the government. I'm just saying that is what our potential will allow at the moment. This is not going to stimulate the economy in any significant way. It's intended to provide some measure of income support in the short run, over the next 3-month period for the people. And I think that that is only the beginning. The government is going to be faced with some huge challenges, and we're going to have to see how this thing goes. I think also that the government is going to have to very carefully decide how to dispense with that money. By the way, George, as I listened yesterday or the day before, I think it was, to the presentations, it was still not clear to me exactly how much money, what's the size of the stimulus package. The government did say that it was seeking approval for $50 million by way of the supplementary appropriation legislation. At the same time, in one of his earlier press conferences, the Prime Minister did note that he already had in place the contingency fund that was required by the by the Public Finance Management legislation. There's a section in that law that says that every year the government must put aside no less than 2% of the monies that are allocated for recurrent revenue. No less than 2% of that must be put aside in a contingency fund to deal with situations like the one that we are facing at the moment. The government's projected revenues for 2020 was $786.2 million. 2% of that works out to just under $16 million. So we are assuming that the government has, it's about $15.75 million, $15.75 million. We are assuming that the government has this allocation already provided for, and that in addition to the 50 million that the government is going to seek now appropriations for, it will be adding that 15 million to what it now has to be able to spend a total of about $65 million. I'm hoping so, because the numbers that the government spelled out in their presentation, surely as detailed by Senator Simon Steele, it looks to me that it is closer to 65 to $70 million is what the government plans to spend. I understand him to be saying that payroll and income support is going to be $30 million. That is 20 million for the hotels and restaurants, bars and clubs and other related businesses of leisure. But then $10 million for income support for the transportation sector, bus owners, drivers, conductors, taxi owners, as well as the tourist vendors. So that's $30 million there. Unemployment insurance benefits in the amount of $10 million to be paid to workers who would not have been employed, who would have been employed at the onset of this, but are now required to stay at home because of the crisis. They will not, some of them may not have a job at the end of this, as you know. That's $40 million right there. An injection of $7 million into the small hoteliers loan facility at the GDB. An injection of $5 million into the GDB small business loan facility. A payment to Grenlec in the amount of $3 million in the form of a subsidy to effect a 30% reduction in electricity bills, and an allocation of $5 million for other persons severely affected by the COVID crisis. He mentioned the farm labor support workers, as well as, the fishermen, the bushers,
Nice.
special, yes.
As I'm sitting here listening to you, and I can't help but just put this together in my mind. You're calling for change, big change in this country.
It will have to be. I mean, no question about it. I do believe that the Prime Minister would recognize that himself. He's a very seasoned and experienced politician. He is going to realize that this is going to require some fundamental shifts in priority, in economic and social.
All right.
So there's no question about that.
Somebody here by the name of Tana Phillip. I have two comments here. Sue Patrice says, yes, Mr. Burke, I know of a woman and 4 kids without a latrine for over a year, and they're living in the vicinity of the St. Paul's police station. More than ever, now we have to be our brother's keeper. So says Sue. But the one that, actually there are 2. Kipling Francis says, Mr. Burke, if asked to be a senator, would you consider it? And before you answer, hold on. Before you answer, Tana Phillip has a similar question. Tana is saying, as one with the experience, who understands the Parliament, and made a great contribution in the House. Question. If you were asked by the opposition to be a part, I guess the person meant opposition leader, to be a part of his team, would you consider the offer?
Well, the question is, what is the team?
I just read the question.
I heard the question.
Nice
But
try.
what I'm saying, George, is this. I love this country. I am prepared to assist in the development of Grenada in whatever way I can. I mean, that is without doubt. I do not have to be the Prime Minister to help. I do not have to be a member of Parliament in the lower house to help. I do not have to be in the Senate to help. As I was saying to you earlier on, I continue to assist in my community. I continue to assist young people wherever I can, in developing the techniques and so on. But, we have to recognize that, um, you know, there is a time for everything. There's a place for everything. That's what the good book says. And I will do what I can where I can. I mean, I don't want to answer a question like that by trying to place the leader of the opposition in a funny spot. I think we should allow people to make their choices. And when they make their choices, or they approach people, what if he has already spoken to 3 people? Then I don't want somebody to say, well, Nazim.
What if he hasn't?
Then and this and that and that and that. Let's allow the opposition leader to make his choices. The commitment I'm giving today is that I will always love this country. I will always be prepared to assist this country in whatever capacity I'm called upon to do.
All right, Naz, first of all, the opposition leader was supposed to be on here this morning, but we had to postpone that to next Sunday morning. He's going to be on 11 o'clock next Sunday morning. So you better find yourself in front of a television, not a television, television or a computer next Sunday morning at 11 o'clock.
I will follow through, yes.
And 2, Sawandi Sam is saying here, we need your voice in times like these. I honestly think you should.
Well, that's why I'm on the program this morning, so that you can hear my voice and I can share my views. Not coming with a political cutlass waving in my hand, but rather to be able to look at the situation objectively. And I hope that the Prime Minister and his will have the courage and the foresight to realize that this problem is bigger than the NNP, is bigger than the NDC, and that the countries that are truly successful are the ones who are able to draw on their greatest potential. If human potential. If you have 2 economists in the country, and you say that you're going to hire, and one is NNP and one is NDC, and you say that the only one you're going to hire is the NNP because it supports your party, then you're operating at 50%. Yeah. If you have 4 doctors and you take 2, and you don't take 2 because 2 supports your party, then you're operating at 50%. The question is, how can we marshal the fullest potential of the human capacity of our human stock? That's really the question for us. And really, it comes down to the quality of leadership.
Bottom line, Naz. All right. I'll tell you what, Naz, we're rapidly running out of time. There are a couple more questions here, which we're not going to have time to get into an in-depth answer, but Dexter Miller is asking, what's your take on the payment to Grenlec to reduce electricity bills?
Frankly, I do not think it's a good idea. Or put differently, I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea because, in my mind, the situation that we are in, that is not a priority that I would want to use. Now, if I have $40 million to spend, recognizing how many persons have been thrown out of their jobs, we've talked about it before, so I wouldn't dwell on it. All of them to go home without jobs, without income possibilities. All of the people who have, we know SGU is temporarily closed. We know that there's been a virtual collapse of our tourism sector, cruise ships, taxis, tourist drivers, vendors. We know hotel workers, bus drivers, all of these people have gone home. Some of them will not have an income. We must also remember, George, that there is perhaps about 40% of the working population in our country are part of what we can call the daily economy. These are people who they earn their income not on a monthly basis, not on a fortnightly basis, not on a weekly basis, but on a daily basis when they leave their homes and go out every day to earn their day's keep. That is the case for the people who are roasting corn and selling on the side of the road. That is the case for the small vegetable vendors that are out there. That is the case for the barbecue vendors. That is the case for the bushing workers, many of whom get 2 fortnights every year, or 3 fortnights every year, but outside of that, have to go by somebody and ask for a day work cutting a land or clearing something and so on. That is the case for the taxi drivers. That is the case for the water taxi operators. That is for the bus drivers, the bus conductors. These are all people that belong to the daily economy, and perhaps about 40% of our workforce is in this group. The question is, if you have some money to give out, right, is it better, right, to put that money in the hands of people who do not have an income, or is it better to say you're going to subsidize Grenlec? If I'm in the position of one of these workers, and you have to choose between paying my Grenlec bill for me and giving me $150 to make my own choices and buy food, I want you to give me the cash in my hand.
All right.
I do not believe that, and not everybody needs electricity support, you see, and it looks to be that it's going to be across the board. I will not do that with $3 million, given my limited income and resources.
All right. Naz, thank you very much. Now that we've broken the ice with this visit, I hope it's not going to be another year or two before we see or hear from you. You know where to find me. I think I know how to track you down as well. And
Yes.
I'd like you to make a commitment to let us see a little bit more of you. Okay? But right now we have to make way for a really great cast that's going to be joining us to talk about food security in this place, and that's going to be a very important issue in the days and weeks ahead. So if you have the time, I would like to ask you to keep an eye on the platform, hear and see what these people have to say. Thanks again, my friend.
Thank you so much, and thank you to your listeners. I wish you all the best, and of course I remain open to appearing on the program. I'm happy to share my perspectives on it, and thank you for the opportunity.
Anytime, sir. Anytime. You're more than welcome. Thank you very much, Mr. Burke. Now,